Publishing is a gate-kept world, but what if I could tell you everything you needed to know about traditional publishing in order to get a book deal with just 7 simple insights? That's right. Today I am going to share the 7 things that nobody is telling you about writing and publishing a nonfiction how-to book that people want to buy and that maybe will hit the bestseller list. Because when we pause and when we think about why y'all are listening to me, why you as an expert or an entrepreneur want to get a book deal, why you're seeking out this information, ultimately that's because you want your words to matter. You want to make an impact. And to do that, the deal is just the beginning. To really make an impact on readers, to really make an impact on your followers, to really grow your audience, your business, your impact, and ultimately your results, you got to sell books. So today we're going to talk about the 7 things you need to realize as an expert or entrepreneur who wants a book deal that's not currently in the conversations I'm seeing online about traditional publishing. I'm going to come in hot, y'all, with the top 7 reasons or things that you're not seeing online, that you're not hearing from other book coaches, that maybe you haven't even heard before. And then I'm going to dig into each. So let's hit the top 7 without any further ado. Number 1, writing your book is actually the easiest fucking part. Number 2, most bestsellers you see are years, if not decades, in the making. Number 3, and this might hit hard, y'all, readers don't give a fuck about your story. 4, the best-selling books solve the simplest problems. 5, the most successful nonfiction authors are consistently focused on growing their business. Number 6, the number 1 source of book sales is gonna be you. That is until 7, when you hit an inflection point where word of mouth is selling your book without you having to do much of anything. But make no mistake, that snowball effect starts with you. So now that you know the top 7 ways that you can write and publish a book that sells, that readers want, we can talk a little deeper about what you absolutely need to know and the mistakes you can avoid. Heads up, in this next part, I'm going to do some show and tell. So if you want to see the visual, and you might want to, check out this episode on YouTube. So let's talk about number 1. Writing a book is the easiest part. So I'm going to back up here because what I've got behind me, and you can see this if you're on YouTube, is all my favorite books that I've worked on in my career. Now, there's another bookshelf in my office that contains all the books that have good energy that I want to keep in my space. And not everybody makes that, by the way. But these are my favorites back here. And I can tell you that every single person on this list, on this shelf, and there's probably, 20, 30 books back there, including the 3 I've got featured down here. Every single one of those people, if I was to bring them on the podcast, they would say, hey, Megan, I thought writing the book would be the hardest part, and it was actually the easiest part. So that's the first thing you need to know about traditionally publishing a book. Now, self-publishing, higher publishing, maybe writing the book is the easiest part there, but most of the time I don't hear that. Most of the time across every side of publishing, people say writing the book is the easiest part. Because it's all on you, right? There's no, you're not hearing no's or comments from haters. You're not, having to sell or market or promote something. You don't have to deal with a team when you write a book unless you're hiring me and then I'm helping you, right? So writing a book is the easiest part. Second, most bestsellers are years, if not decades, in the making. So one of my most famous and certainly Instagram famous clients is Rachel Rogers. Here is her book, We Should All Be Millionaires. So I didn't write this book. I'm going to be completely straightforward. I helped Rachel with her book proposal. So I helped her land her literary agent and her deal. And what I knew at the time was that we worked on this proposal and this book in, I want to say fall of 2018, spring of 2019. And when we worked on this book proposal together, she had been an entrepreneur for 10 years. She had run a law firm for several years, and then she had changed to what she's been doing for the last, 5 to 10 years, which is running Hello 7, her company. But that book and the ideas in it took her 10 years to figure out and extrapolate into frameworks and organize her thoughts and all those things. So that's number 2. Most bestsellers are years, if not decades, in the making. Number 3, and this can be a hard one. This can be like kind of kill your darlings-ish. Readers don't give a shit about your story. In many ways, this is an entrepreneurial mistake. So it's a fact of business, all business, that customers ultimately don't care about you, the business owner, the service provider. They care about themselves. Now, maybe, I go to a yoga studio in my neighborhood. I love that owner. She's great. Is she my bestie? No. Would I, be in contact with her if I wasn't taking yoga? No. After I leave the studio, are we going to be friends? Probably not, right? And so if you think about that, like, there is a parasocial relationship, especially if you're online, between your followers and you, that's going to happen. And your readers and you, certainly. My best-selling authors, they kind of have a cult following around them, right? Rachel included. So, like, it is what it is. But I think when we think about you getting your deal, getting your book, a lot of times when authors come to me, they're like, my story's so important. And it is to you. But customers and readers don't care about you. They care about themselves. And that's really true for your book as well. So, and that's especially true with the publishing industry, because they are seeing your book not as a piece of work or, a deeply personal, heartfelt representation of you. They're not seeing that shit as precious at all. They are seeing it as money. They are seeing it as a unit. They are seeing it like, a UPC code of Cheetos at the grocery store. And they're literally thinking of it that way because that is their business, right? They are commercializing it. They are putting out books as product. And so, when you think about it, the less precious you can be as your author yourself, the better, especially when you're in the process of getting a deal. So when we remember, though, that readers are buying your book to solve their problem, and that problem could be anything, right? It could be making money and generating wealth. It could be losing weight. It could be learning how to, master a skill. It could be simply to entertain you. In terms of fiction, that's entertainment, right? So if you consider why readers are buying your book, it's to solve their problem, right? Because even though it's your story and it might be really meaningful to you, ultimately what they're trying to do is like improve their lives through your story. And memoir does that well when it's executed well, but it's really hard to do. So that's why I actually talk about discouraging people from memoir and thinking more about prescriptive nonfiction, because we're creating problem solution. It doesn't mean your story can't be a part of that. It absolutely can. But when we're just sharing our story, just the way that we're kind of wired as humans, we're less likely to engage. It's kind of like how when someone talks about themselves all the time, we kind of tune out at a certain point, right? Unless we're highly invested in that person. Same idea here. And the reason I say it's an entrepreneurial mistake is because a lot of people make that mistake with their marketing. You'll see it all the time with new entrepreneurs on social media. They'll be talking about them and their story and all of that, and they're not focused on the customer, right? Good marketing is always focused on the customer. And so that's what we're trying to do here with our book too. We're trying to market, even if that is to our literary agent, right? Even if that is to a publisher, even if that is to your editor, even if that is to, your readers you're following, you're always trying to engage them about what they care about, what they're passionate about, rather than being me all the time. All right, number 4, and this is one of my favorites, y'all. The best-selling books solve the simplest fucking problems. Okay, this book is so simple. And for y'all that are listening, I'm pulling up Atomic Habits, of course. I didn't even finish this book. Actually, before I jumped on the podcast today, I took out my bookmark because it was only halfway through, and it has literally been in there for 4 years. I never even finished this book, honestly. It was that simple. And the way that James Clear did this is really brilliant, is that he and his team studied the New York Times bestseller list and the content within those books specifically, so he would know how to structure a best-selling book. So if you've ever looked at the bestseller list, or you watched something like The 5-Second Rule or The Let Them Theory be gigantic bestsellers, or Girl Wash Your Face, a great example as well, and you just thought, wow, this book's really dumb. Why are they best-selling? That's this in action, really. The best-selling books solve the most simple problems, right? But you also see that this is a perennial problem, right? Habits, improving our lives, getting great results, making tiny changes. That is fantastic, right? Everybody wants that. So they're perennial problems, they are simple problems, and they are universal in a lot of ways problems, right? The more niche we get, the easier your sales, marketing, promotion is going to be as an author, but the smaller the market you have. So that can be advantageous. I'll probably do a whole episode just on that, whether to niche or not niche, that is the question. But in terms of, best-selling books, like a lot of times they have a formula, right? It might not be as obvious as like romance or sci-fi formulas, but there is a formula. Okay, number 5. The most successful nonfiction authors are consistently focused on growing their business. So the other day I sent a landing page of one client to another client because I said, look, she is doing the best pre-sale thing she could do. Because she was doing everything. My client's doing everything for her upcoming book. And it's going to be out by the time this book is out, so I'm not going to share it. But it was a great thing. And what is universally true among my clients that have been successful, both in terms of being ready to write a proposal, being able to get a deal, and then having great success for their book beyond the initial deal and the initial sales period, is that they're constantly investing in growing their business and expanding their audience, reaching new people, and like just really learning from what's been successful for them in the past and iterating on that and just keep growing it, right? And the book is just one piece of that. Now, my successful clients are incorporating that book into their content. They're incorporating it into their business operations. They're giving it to every client. They're creating speaking engagements and offers around it. They're doing everything they can do. But that book is just one piece of all their goals. The book isn't siloed, and it certainly isn't a magic source of new followers, leads, business growth, clients, speaking engagements, because y'all, that is not how books work. Okay, I've done this in the past. I'm going to do it again. And again, this is another great idea for you to watch me on video. But this book, I'm holding up Atomic Habits, is basically paper, ink, and glue, right? It does not walk. It does not talk. It does not promote for you, y'all. So it's not a magic source of growing your business. I actually had a friend who reached out to me recently, and we've been working together for 5 or 6 years. I'm her client, just in full transparency. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm going to hybrid publish because it'll get me all these opportunities. And I was like, you've already self-published another book. You should know better by now, right? But I was like, look, that's not how it works, right? You create the opportunity and then you sell books through those opportunities you create, right? The book doesn't magically do shit. And so she was like, oh yeah, you're right, But it was really funny because I think a lot of people get into that magic thinking because there is a lot of marketing message and promotion from self and hybrid publishers saying like, write your book and use it as a business card and it'll do all these amazing things for you. But that is just a marketing message, y'all. That is not the reality for most people. So what a better strategy is saying, okay, here are all the goals I have for my work, for my impact, for my life, for my money, for my, whatever. And here's how the book fits into all of those things. Spoiler alert, that can also be a great way to figure out which type of publishing you do, right? Because if your goals for your work, your impact, your life, your money aren't aligned with traditional publishing, cool, no problem, right? Or maybe you find that they are. In my friend's case, they totally were. She just didn't think of it that way. Okay, so that is number 5. The most successful nonfiction authors are consistently focused on growing their business. Okay, number 6, and I'm maybe I'll live to regret this, but I'm going to sing this in sync. So if you catch the reference, good for you. So number 6, the number 1 source of books sold is gonna be you. All right. Publishers don't know how to market to every audience they publish. This should seem really straightforward, but it's so funny. I have to always be repeating this message because people don't get it. I don't know why. I don't know. It's kind of like the nuclear family where everybody thinks there's a time where America was great and we had these perfect nuclear families and everyone had what they had and there wasn't any unhoused people and there wasn't any poverty, and that's just not real, ever. So same thing. It has never been the case where a publisher could just make you a best-selling author, right? It's just not how that works. And in today's market, and at least the market of the last 20 years, and this is pre-social media, real internet, they don't know how to market to your distinct audience, right? They don't know how to market to every single niche, every single reader, every single store even. And so that's why traditional publishers require authors to have an audience. So if you don't like the reality that you have to promote, market, and sell your own book, and you are going to be the number one source of your book sales, then that's just unrealistic for traditional publishing. You can self-publish, you can hybrid publish, but across all those different avenues of publishing, no matter which way you publish, the number one source of books sold is going to be from your promotion, your efforts, your marketing, your connections, your speaking engagements, and your pre-existing sales channels. Okay? So that's really, really important. I think that's probably the biggest thing that people don't talk about enough. There's a lot of complaining online about what publishers don't do, but publishers have never done this shit. And you as an author, as a business person, should want to sell your shit. I don't know how this is like that crazy. I love selling my shit. I love talking to people who are a good fit for the offers I have. I love it. Be like, great, get on the phone with me. I'm going to figure out if I can help you, if we're the right fit for each other, and if we are, I'm going to sell you on it. But if we're not, I'm not. Pretty simple, right? But it is really, really important that you understand that sales comes from you. There is an exception to this, okay? And this is number 7. I mentioned it before. When you hit an inflection point where word of mouth starts to sell your book. So let me explain how this happens. You might have seen it. I think the Let Them theory is a great example of this. I think Girl Wash Your Face is a fantastic example of this. And this is where like authors come out of nowhere. They do not come out of nowhere, okay? It's that you haven't been paying attention. Or that you haven't seen this part of the internet, right? It's always amazing to me when there's like a new influencer in my inbox or on my social asking me about publishing and they have like 5 million followers and I've never heard of them in my life. It happens more often than you think. But here's how it goes. So initial book promotion, and I am by no means an expert in book promotion, so I'm saying this as a fly on the wall, okay? So basically what happens, and I love for this to happen, is you as the author go out and you promote the heck out of your book. You know, you do it in pre-sale for 6 months before your book is out. You do it, you know, the month of your publication. You throw the book parties. You do the launches. You do the webinars. You do the freebies. You do the add-ons. You do the coaching incubation. You do the mastermind. Whatever the heck you do a bunch of speaking engagements. Whatever it is, right? And then what happens is it gets in the hands of your readers. And the first person it's going to get into is the hands of early adopters. So this is an established trend in, I think it comes from tech or marketing and sales, retail sales. But you get people that are like early adopters to you and that are like just the biggest fans. And they're going to go out and buy a lot of books. And that's great. But what that'll indicate then, let's say I go down the street here to my independent bookstore and I say, hey, I would love, 10 copies of We Shall Be Millionaires. And then my friend down the street also goes down and says, hey, I'd like a couple copies of We Shall Be Millionaires. They might stock We Shall Be Millionaires and see if it sells through, right? Because independent bookstores all create their own inventory. So it's not like a set range of books. That's why independent bookstores don't have every single book ever. They have books they think they can sell. So, if I'm doing that, that creates a little bit of a wave. And if that book consistently sells through that store, even if it's 1 copy, 2 copies, 3 copies a month, it's going to keep being in that store. So then you're going to have a couple of snowball effects. First of all, you're going to have customer reviews that are great. You're going to say, hey, you really should read this book. You're going to have, podcast appearances that people are listening to 5 years after the fact. You're going to have shares. You're going to have booksellers in the stores hand selling, saying, hey, I loved Rich AF by Vivian too, and you should read it if you're looking for a book on how to manage money. You have those little shelf talkers. Those are those little tags saying, Beth at the indie bookstore loves this book. There is that snowball effect. And you get a little bit of that too from the bestseller list. I think people think this is more magic than it is. But you do get a little bit of that from the bestseller list, if only because bestseller lists lend credibility. Same thing with like having enough sales to be in the airport store, or having enough sales to be in, secondary markets like, retail shops and yoga studios and gift shops and things like that. But all of that, if we back up that train, all of it comes from you, right? Because if you hadn't gone out and sold it, if you hadn't established a big enough audience to get the deal in the first place, none of that would have happened at all. So I have a funny story about this, and I feel like I tell this story a lot, but I'm going to keep telling it because it's awesome, and also this book is awesome. So How to Retire Overseas by Kathleen Petticord. So when I was at Penguin, I edited this book. I did not come up with the idea to acquire it. My boss did. The publisher at the time came to me and said, hey, reach out to these people and see if they want to write a book. And so I literally called Kathleen up and said, hey, do you want to write a book? And she said, yes, of course. Okay. And she is an OG of online marketing, man. She had an email list in like 2011. Okay. So she and I, she worked on this book. She wrote it. It's great. It's a great book. We put it out in hardcover. And this book, let's see, when was this book published? This book was published in 2011. So that means the original book came out in 2010, which means she actually had a email list in 2009. So let me back that up. Wow, how early is that? It's like the time of blogs and things. So anyway, we published the book in hardcover in 2010. And it does okay, but not anything crazy. But enough to justify a paperback. Should do an episode on that too. Why some books go in paperback and some don't. But I went to paperback, and about 6 months in, the publisher of the paperback imprint that I worked for at the time, an imprint called Plume, which was within Penguin and is now within Penguin Random House, she called me into her office and she said, hey, why is this book selling? And I was like, I don't know. Let me go ask the author, right? So I go back to my office and I email Kathleen and I said, hey, your book's selling great. Congratulations. What's up? And she said, oh, yes, we're just doing this big launch. We had this big conference. We had to buy like 1,000 books. And, we put it in with Barnes & Noble because I didn't want to bother with Penguin, blah, blah, blah. So I go back to my boss, who's at the time is named Catherine, the publisher, Kathleen, the author. And I said, hey, Kathleen said she just had her big conference and she's got this like launch going on and they're buying a bunch of bulk buys. And then also like she's just getting a lot of visibility right now. And they were like, oh, awesome, great. And this book has been one of my best-selling books of my entire career. I forget where it's at, but it's definitely over 100,000 copies. And that author didn't have 1 million followers. That author didn't have, like an amazing media. Like, she just has a really good business. And so that's really, really important. But that snowball effect came from her. Like, we didn't know where it came from as the publisher because we couldn't see all of that. But one quick email to her was like, oh yeah, I did this. And then now we're seeing all this, like, basically grassroots, organic, word of mouth. Crazy, right? So it's awesome. All right, let's go back. So that was number 7. So we can recap. In this episode, I shared the 7 things nobody is telling you, other than me, about writing a book that people want to buy and that eventually becomes a bestseller. So let's recap those top 7 things that I've told you, but nobody else is saying online. Number 1, writing a book. It's the easiest part. Number 2, most bestsellers are years, if not decades, in the making. Number 3, readers do not care about your story. They care about what they're going to get out of buying and reading your book. Number 4, the best-selling books solve simple-ass problems. Number 5, the most successful nonfiction authors are consistently focused on growing their business, and the reason why is because that grows their audience, it grows their readership, it grows their book sales, and it grows sales of everything else. Number 6, the number 1 source of book sales, it's gonna be you. Number 7, until you hit an inflection point, right? The number 1 source of book sales is going to be you as the author until you hit an inflection point where word of mouth sells your book. But make no mistake, the beginning of any snowball effect you get is still going to be you. Okay? It's still going to come from you. Now, it's your turn because I want to know what you want to know. So what questions do you have about writing a book that people want to buy? What questions do you have about making your book idea a New York Times bestseller? Feel free to drop me a line, leave me a voicemail, comment on my socials. Links, as always, are in the show notes. And until next time, cheers to your success. Thanks for tuning into the Kind of Big Book Deal podcast. Want to see where you're at on your book journey? Check out my free quiz at meghanstevenson.com/quiz. That's MEGHANSTEVENSON.com/quiz. See you next time.